您正在收看的是新西兰报中心之窗试点。
哇哦！大家下午好，很开心大家能看到这么多华人的媒体记者，尤其是我们新西兰本地的记者。It's my absolute pleasure to introduce my boss. No further introductions needed, but it's a great chance for us to share Chris's experience in China and our really successful business delegation to China. So the floor is yours.
大家好. Good afternoon, everybody. It's fantastic to be with you, and I thought I'd firstly introduce myself. I'm Chris Hipkins, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, a long-standing Labour Party Member of Parliament. I had the great opportunity to take up the job as Prime Minister back in January this year when my predecessor Jacinda Ardern stood down. It's been a very busy time since then. In fact, I believe I was due to meet with many of you shortly after taking on the job. I got sworn in as Prime Minister on the 25th of January, and then of course we had the flooding here in Auckland on the 27th of January, and quite a few things have happened in between times that have often disrupted my program. So it is great to be able to be with you today to share some reflections on my recent travel to China and to answer any questions that you might have about those or other relevant issues to the Chinese community here in New Zealand. I had the opportunity to lead a trade delegation to China just recently. It was an incredibly positive trip. I had the opportunity to meet with, obviously, President Xi, but also other leaders from the Chinese government, have good, wide-ranging conversations about issues affecting both of our countries. And I believe that the relationship between New Zealand and China is in a very good heart. It's a very strong relationship. It's a mature relationship, which means that we have the opportunity to disagree with each other from time to time, and that does not need to define our relationship. We can share our disagreements, but actually we can work very constructively together on those areas where we do agree. And we do completely agree on the importance of international trade. And New Zealand's trading relationship with China is vital to our economic interests. When we signed the free trade agreement with China back in 2008, the two-way trade between New Zealand and China was worth about $8 billion a year. In the short period of time since then, it's grown to over $40 billion per year, and it's likely to continue to grow. During our travels to China, we had the opportunity to witness a number of agreements that will continue to further the economic relationship between our two countries. There is enormous opportunity for growth for our exporters in China. But there was also enormous opportunity for more Chinese visitors to come to New Zealand for tourism, for study, and so on. And we had the opportunity to further discussions around that as well. So I'm excited about the state of our relationship, the New Zealand-China relationship. As I said, I think it's in good heart, and we can continue to work together on quite a wide range of issues. It is an election year here in New Zealand, as you'd be aware, and I'm leading the Labour Party into the coming election. And I'll be looking for every vote that I possibly can get. And of course I will be looking to convince New Zealanders, or Chinese people based in New Zealand, to vote for the New Zealand Labour Party. And so I'm happy to answer any questions on the forthcoming election campaign as well. So, yeah.
Hi, Prime Minister. I'm Jackie Su. I'm from the local Chinese media Sky TV. And please allow me to other officers, but we didn't get any response. So my question is, why did it take so long for you to finally meet our Chinese media? And what's your expectation of our Chinese media? And more importantly, about Chinese New Zealanders? Thank you.
Thank you. My expectation, I guess, is that I'll continue to try and engage with as many media in New Zealand as possible. There are a lot of different media outlets in New Zealand all competing for attention and competing for my time. And as I did indicate, I think we've had a couple of goes at scheduling time with the Chinese media that have been disrupted for various reasons. I had the opportunity to engage with a number of Chinese media whilst in China and a number of New Zealand Chinese media outlets during in the run-up to that trip and during that trip as well, and I'll continue to do that.
Thank you.
Prime Minister, in this trip, how do you feel about the Chinese economy, especially after COVID? That's the question.
Thank you. It's great to see the Chinese economy rebounding from the effects of the global pandemic as economies around the world are. We're all experiencing the if you like, the after effects of the global pandemic in different ways. New Zealand, of course, wants to grow with China. We want to see the Chinese economy growing because we see that that's a way for the New Zealand economy to grow as we look to export. And so I'm always very reluctant to provide a commentary on the economy of any other country. But I certainly saw during my visit to China that China's reconnecting with the world, that there are huge opportunities in that for New Zealand to grow our exports, to continue to attract Chinese visitors to New Zealand, whether they're coming for study or for pleasure, and that I guess the continued growth of the Chinese economy has the potential to be very good for New Zealand. Yes.
Oh, my name is Lin. I'm the trustee for the new trust called Chinese Language Media Trust. My question, actually two questions. The first one is about we are very excited about the social media. We know we just have the agreement with China of the social media. We have 260 users, the Xiaohongshu. Can you tell us more about that? The other question is we are talking about not the traditional trading forms. We have to other green economy. And I also know we are talking about gaming and health and also the retirees. So can you explore more and tell us more about that? What we are going to do with China and what we can offer and what we can learn from them as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
There are enormous opportunities in the clean, green, renewable space and the sustainability space for New Zealand in our relationship with China. If I think about our existing primary sector exports, for example, we know that Chinese consumers want to ensure that the products that they're buying have been sustainably produced. And so things like our primary produce, so our milk, our dairy products, our fruit, and our meat, we need to be able to demonstrate that those are being produced in a way that is sustainable. And so that means continuing to put climate change at the forefront of the work that we're doing around exports and around production of primary produce. And so we will be doing that, and I know that that's something that's incredibly important in China. I think as we look to decarbonise the planet, then areas like renewable energy highlight more opportunities for New Zealand to work with like-minded countries. China is going to be critical to the world's uptake of more renewable energy. And so a strong partnership in that area will be good for both of our countries. I think that we can continue to work together in that area. I want New Zealand to be, if you'll excuse the pun, an international powerhouse when it comes to renewable energy. And I think we're going to have to work with like-minded countries in order to be able to achieve that. Around social media, the reach of social media in China was brought home to me by the fact that we had Te Whanaua Apanui, a kapa haka group, who travelled with me on the plane up to China performing a haka on the Great Wall, and that it was viewed by something like 40 million people within a very short space of time of it being posted online. And so I think social media is clearly an area that we need to continue to pursue in the relationship between our two countries. And I'm sure that we'll have more to say on that in due course.
And how about that with security and censorship around the social media?
Yeah, that ultimately is a matter for China. But New Zealand supports an open and democratic internet. With some safeguards in place, and you'll be familiar with the Christchurch call, for example, which was led by New Zealand. It was about removing extremist violent content from social media platforms. We absolutely stand by that work. We don't see that as a form of censorship. We see that as a form of law enforcement, if you like. But we support a free and open internet. Yes.
Hi, I'm Christina from Chinese Herald. Thank you for gathering us together here and engage with the Chinese community. My question is, according to the recent poll, 60% of New Zealanders think the government is on a wrong track. Obviously, you don't agree with it. Can you please tell the Chinese community what your thoughts are?
I acknowledge that New Zealand's had some pretty difficult times and experiences in the last few years. So we've had the global pandemic, and then we've had the after effects of the global pandemic, which have included reopening the borders, and there's been all sorts of turbulence that's gone with that. We've then had the global inflationary pressures, which have definitely affected New Zealand household budgets. And we have seen a rise in some new areas of concern, such as youth crime, for example, where we've seen concern around ram raiding, the smash and grab type offending, and gang offending. That New Zealanders have every right to feel concerned about. My message to all New Zealanders is that the government is absolutely aware of those issues. On crime, we've got a very proactive program to deal with the causes of crime so that there are fewer people offending in the first place, because we don't think that responding after crime has taken place is a sufficient answer. We should be doing everything we can to prevent it from happening. In terms of the cost of living, I've put that at the front and centre of my time as Prime Minister, because I acknowledge that that is the number one issue facing Kiwi households on a daily basis at the moment. And that's why this year's budget contained a range of different targeted measures designed to ease some of that cost of living pressure. So discounted or free public transport for young people, free prescriptions where people visit the pharmacy, extending the eligibility for free early childhood education. These are all things that will help to ease household family budget pressure. And New Zealanders will be able to expect to see that we'll be talking about that during the election campaign as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Clarence from January 31st. So how do you see the future of China and New Zealand relations following your visit? And are there any potential challenges or opportunities you believe need to be addressed?
I think the New Zealand-China relationship will continue to be important for both countries, and I'm confident that the diplomatic relationship between the two countries is in a good, strong position where we can agree and we can disagree, and we can continue to grow the relationship.
So at the meeting in the Great Hall in China where you met President Xi, the media reported very little about what you talked about. Now that the time has passed, are you able to offer some more information regarding the specifics of what you talked about? And my second question is that after being in China, I know that you said the food was delicious and that you didn't want to leave. So before embarking on this formal business trip, did you expect the trip and China to feel so welcoming?
Thank you. I'll answer the last part of the question first, because that's the fun part. I've had the opportunity to visit China before, first as a tourist some time ago, and then more recently as Minister of Education. So I had the opportunity to try some Chinese food on those visits, and it's always been a highlight of visiting China. So the Peking duck was particularly delicious, I have to say. I'm happy to go back again on that basis. In terms of the topics of what we discussed after the meetings, we generally, I do a media press conference where I would summarise the main issues that New Zealand raised during those conversations. We generally don't, speak on behalf of another country. So so in the case of my meeting with President Xi, and it's New Zealand's view that it's up to the Chinese government to share what he said rather than me. But I'm certainly happy to share what I said. So I raised the importance of the New Zealand relationship. We raised the importance of export. And I had the opportunity in my meetings with President Xi, but also Premier Li as well, to raise areas where we might have some disagreement. I asked the Chinese government to use all of its influence to encourage Russia to withdraw from its war in Ukraine. We also were able to encourage a diplomatic resolution to tensions in the Taiwan Strait, which I believe is in the interests of the whole world. And we talked about issues such as human rights.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Prime Minister. I'm Amy from GoTV. So my question is, do you know there are many mainstream media reported on the exploitation of the Chinese migrant workers in New Zealand? So do you think that the credit system caused that kind of issue, and what can you do to improve that?
I think any instances of migrant exploitation in New Zealand should be taken very seriously. The government will not tolerate exploitation of our migrants. We recognise the value that migrant workers bring to New Zealand businesses and to the New Zealand economy, and they should not be being exploited. we introduced the accredited employer work visa, so that where any issues of migrant exploitation were revealed, we could do something to stop that from happening. That's what the accredited employer work visa is designed to achieve. So the instances in question are under investigation, and if proven, then those employers can lose their accreditation. And there are other potential legal consequences for them as well, depending on the nature of the activity that they've been engaged in. Yes.
Thank you, Prime Minister. So my question is about NICE, because we all know now in the Parliament there is only one Chinese MP, which is NICE Chen, and the newly released Labour ranking shows NICE ranked like 33. So because Chinese population counts around like 5% of the whole Kiwi population, do you think Labour should have more Chinese MP, and also for the government should have more Chinese MP as well? Which means in Labour, maybe probably should be like 2 to 3 MPs, and at least one of them should be deputy minister level MP. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let me start by talking about my colleague first, and say how valued she is as a member of our team. What a fantastic job I think she's doing in Parliament. It must be, in some respects, a lonely job being the only Chinese representative in the New Zealand Parliament, and I think that you have an outstanding advocate in NACI. And so I certainly hope that the Chinese community will vote for the Labour Party so that we can continue to have her in our team. Because I think you're very, very well served in that regard. Overall, should we have more Chinese representatives in the New Zealand Parliament? Of course, I'd love to see the Parliament continuing to more closely reflect the demographic makeup of New Zealand. And so I would encourage those within the Chinese community who have an interest in politics to get involved in political parties, because ultimately that's the way that they can then go on to become selected as candidates and end up in Parliament.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Hello, Prime Minister. I'm Maxwell from the Go2NZ. We all know the Australia and the New Zealand recently are showing some interest in the seamless trade. So, were there any advancements in tourism cooperation between China and New Zealand?
Yes, tourism exchange between New Zealand and China is incredibly important. China is one of the largest markets for tourists coming to New Zealand, and so we do want to see that continuing. One of the things I was very pleased to be part of was the announcement by China Southern that they're increasing the frequency of flights to New Zealand, including that they're restoring direct flights from China to Christchurch in New Zealand, so opening up more opportunities in the South Island for Chinese tourists visiting New Zealand. That's incredibly encouraging. Thousands of extra seats are now available on a weekly basis between New Zealand and China, helping us with that people-to-people flow. Yes.
My name is Luca from Link. My question is, Christopher Luxon mentioned that National would absolutely accept Chinese money to fund its proposed road network. Will Labour adopt the same approach, a similar approach, or do you have any different strategy for funding infrastructure projects? Thank you.
So under the New Zealand Overseas Investment Act, any international investment needs to be considered against a strategic interests test. And I'm not proposing to change that. So it does leave open the potential for overseas investment in New Zealand, including from China, but they have to, any such overseas investment has to go through a strategic interest test. That test has been in place for a long time. I believe it's served New Zealand interests very well, and that will continue to apply under our government. If the National Party are proposing to change that, then they should explain their own policy on that in that regard. Yes.
You mentioned about China Airlines more flights into New Zealand. Are there any other results or benefits from the trip, such as agreement signed or more contracts for business and people?
Yes, there were a number of agreements signed during the visit, including around tourism promotion, for example. I don't have all of the details of those, but I can certainly make sure that they are supplied to you. And last couple of questions down the back. You guys haven't asked any questions yet, so.
Recently, the crime rates in New Zealand have been more or less quite high in regards to the shootings, for example. What does the government actually plan to do about these things, if you can comment on that?
If I take the two aspects of crime that I know the public are very anxious about, so one is gun crime. We're doing a number of things to crack down on gangs who are often behind the gun crime. So about 43,000 charges have been made against gang members by the New Zealand Police in the last 18 months or so. That does reflect the fact that the police are really proactively targeting gang-related offending, because it's not acceptable and it's not okay. We're also in the process of introducing tighter gun regulation, including the establishment of a gun register, which again will help us to prevent the illegal trade of firearms, which is what gangs rely on, both as a source of making money, but also as a source of committing violent acts. In areas around retail crime, so this is the smash and grabs or the ram raids, that's not okay and it's not acceptable. The government's approaching this at every level. So first of all, we want to make sure that the young people who are getting themselves into trouble aren't getting themselves into trouble in the first place. So we've got some programs that are designed to turn their lives around very quickly. And they are working for about 3/4 of the young people who have been involved in this offending. So the fast track initiatives that get them sorted out means that they don't go on to reoffend. But for somewhere between 20 to 25%, so around a quarter of those young people, they are locked in a more persistent pattern of offending, and we need to do more. We've recently announced some further law changes in Parliament that will escalate the consequences for those continual repeat offenders, so that we can break the cycle for them and stop them from reoffending.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you.